as I was doing some research for this class, I looked at some of the information that's kept by the Department of Safety. These are statistics that are kept by law enforcement that are reported to the Department of Public Safety, and these come out in an annual publication that's available on the internet. The information I've got here is for Clark County, and some of the things I'll point out is you see various types of relationships when there's been a report of domestic violence. You see domestic violence reports between cohabitants, between spouse, dating relationships, children in common, blood relatives, parents, children, former spouse, former dating relationship, former cohabitant related by marriage. Another thing that I'll point out on this slide is that in many cases when domestic violence is reported, there is reports that children are present. There's other information on there, and I'll get you the website for where you can go and look at this information yourself. Let me move on to the next slide. This slide talks about reported offender information, and you'll see that it breaks it down to both male reported offenders and female reported offenders. And going back to that a couple of slides ago, you see that it's really happening in all age groups where it's reported, all races, for both reported male and reported female offenders. Another thing that I'll point out that comes up is that alcohol and drug use is suspended in a high number of reported domestic violence cases. This is another page that's listed in the report that talks about it from a victim perspective, and you see that really the same types of things, all ages, all races, and some of the other information I talked about. For those of you who are interested in statistics, getting into some more information on this, nvrepository.state.nv.us. There's a lot of information there. And then also, the Nevada Supreme Court collects information from each of the courts about cases that are filed in our courts. This next slide I'll go to in a moment collects or will provide you with some information about the number of cases that are being filed in our Mesquite courts. So this slide shows you the number of cases filed from roughly the last 5 years or so. And I've listed both the municipal court and justice court and provided you with some of the information that comes from the Supreme Court publication. And if you look over the last 5 years, the number of filings, the bulk of the cases where domestic violence is reported are coming into our municipal court. These would be the first or second offense domestic violence cases. You're also seeing some cases going into our justice court, and these are typically the third offense or more domestic violence cases. And I don't know 100% whether this is capturing some of the other cases where there might be a domestic violence component, such as a sexual assault case. So that there may be other cases that would not necessarily show up on this. But I think this is capturing most of the cases that are being filed in our courts. And if you kind of look at the average over the last 5 years, I think you're seeing 60 to 70, somewhere in that range per year. Now, as I was looking back at more of a historical trend, looking at some of the Department of Public Safety records, in the 5-year period before that, you were seeing some higher numbers. There were some years during that 2005 to 2009 year period where the number of cases being filed were at or above 100. But then in 2009, 2010, it appears that the number of cases were starting to decline. Well, what are courts doing when they're seeing these cases come in? What are courts concerned about? Courts are concerned about the administration of justice, making sure that rights are respected, that people are getting a fair trial. And when I talk about rights, there are rights for both reported offenders and reported victims. There are a number of rights that victims have. One of them that comes to mind is the opportunity to speak. If someone pleads guilty or is found guilty, a victim is given the opportunity to speak at the time of sentencing before the court makes a decision on what happens. Courts are concerned about victim, family, and community safety. And that concern can come before the court at various stages of the proceedings. It can come up at the beginning stages when the court is considering either a protective order or a request from the city at a bail hearing, that if the person gets out on bail, that there might be a no contact order or something like that. Additionally, issues of safety come up, as well as accountability, deterrence, rehabilitation. Those types of goals come up if someone pleads guilty or is found guilty at a trial. Accountability. Nevada law regarding domestic violence sets forth a number of required elements that get at these principles here. Perhaps some of the other speakers might talk about that and can get into some more of the specifics, but there's required fines and fees, there's required community service, there's required jail time, there's also required counseling with rehabilitation. And a lot of the training I've attended indicates that unless there's intervention and some type of help for people who have problems with domestic violence, is that the problem will continue, won't get better without some intervention. And so rehabilitation, typically what you'll see in a misdemeanor case with regard to that, you'll see required weekly counseling sessions with a professional certified domestic violence counselor for a period of time. Now, I'm not capturing all the criminal case process, but some of the, much of it I've listed here. You've got, after an arrest, the court gets involved with setting bail, with having arraignments, trials and appeals. And I've already touched on this. If there's a sentencing hearing held after a guilty plea or someone is found guilty at trial, there's an opportunity for the parties and the victim to be heard. There's also some of the things I talked about as far as required sentencing components. And the court also tries to do things that address underlying issues such as alcohol or drug use. Finally, I'll point out that after there's been a sentencing hearing, the court will schedule what's called a status check, and that's a time for the defendant to come back to court, and the court can follow up and make sure the defendant is doing the things that he's been ordered to do. I'm going to wrap up now and give your other guests an opportunity to speak and hear from them. But I want to thank you for the great things you're doing in our community. You are making a difference. I'm sure you've all heard the ancient Chinese proverb that the best day to plant a tree was 30 days ago. The second best day to plant a tree is today. And as I look at the good things that are happening in Mesquite, I see that trees are being planted every day in the form of generosity and service. So thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for taking a collaborative approach to finding solutions to problems you're seeing. I applaud you for your efforts.